Israeli Kfir Brigade withdraws from Gaza after 2 months, losing 13 soldiers in northern fighting. Israeli Defense Minister threatens to cancel Lebanon's ceasefire unless Hezbollah withdraws south of the Litani River. And Turkish minister reports 40,000 Syrians voluntarily returned home through border crossings since December the 8th. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time, and you're now watching Q News, and we begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has spoken with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken about Gaza and Syria. Abdulati called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, unimpeded humanitarian aid, and an end to Israel's targeting of healthcare infrastructure. Regarding Syria, Abdulati emphasized Egypt's support for a nationally owned, inclusive political transition. Blinken praised Egypt's vital role in regional stability during their discussion. Israeli Army radio has announced that the Kfir Brigade has withdrawn from the Gaza Strip after 2 consecutive months of fighting in its northern region. The radio station reported that the departure of the Kfir Brigade does not necessarily indicate a reduction in the number of active forces, noting that the brigade has lost 13 soldiers in northern Gaza over the past 2 months. Health authorities in Gaza have reported that the death toll from Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip has surpassed 45,800, with more than 109,000 people injured. The latest figures follow reports of Israeli occupation forces killing 88 Palestinians and injuring 208 others in the Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours. Palestinian media has reported that Israeli drone strikes injured several people in northwestern Gaza City. Meanwhile, in southern Gaza City, Israeli artillery bombed the outskirts of the Sabra neighborhood, according to Palestinian sources. The Palestinian news agency has reported that a Palestinian was killed early this morning in an Israeli drone strike on the Shabura area of Rafah refugee camp in southern Gaza. The agency added that the attack occurred at dawn and the victim's identity has not yet been released. Wafa news agency has reported that the occupation army arrested at least 20 Palestinians, including children and former prisoners, in the West Bank over the past 24 hours. It added that the arrest took place across several occupied West Bank governorates, including Hebron, Bethlehem, Tulkarm, Jericho, Ramallah, and Jerusalem. plane carrying the Israeli delegation participating in ceasefire negotiations for Gaza has returned to Israel from the Qatari capital Doha. The Israeli Broadcasting Authority reported that the delegation, which had been conducting indirect negotiations with Hamas, boarded its flight on Sunday afternoon, returning to Tel Aviv from Doha, where it arrived on Friday. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk has criticized Israel's justification for striking Kamal Adwan Hospital in Gaza, describing it as vague and unsupported by evidence. Israel claimed credible intelligence linked to a hospital to Hamas activities, but provided insufficient proof. Turk emphasized the need for an independent investigation into attacks on Gaza's hospitals, healthcare facilities, and infrastructure. And this comes as the United Nations Security Council has convened to discuss the Israel-Palestinian conflict. The Biden administration has approved $8 billion arms sale to Israel. According to Axios, the proposed deal, which requires approval from both the House of Representatives and Senate committees, includes munitions for fighter jets and attack helicopters, artillery shells, small diameter bombs, and warheads. In August, the Biden administration approved over $20 billion in new weapons sales to Israel, which included 50 F-15 fighter jets, 33,000 tank cartridges, and 50,000 explosive mortar cartridges. Physicians for Human Rights Israel, PHRI, have stated that the destruction of the health system in northern Gaza will be complete if Israel is allowed to evacuate the last two remaining operational medical centers. In a statement on social media, the group said that if the Indonesian hospital and Al Auda hospital are forced to close by Israel's military, there will be no medical centers left in northern Gaza. The organization also called on all international actors to intervene immediately and halt Israel's ethnic cleansing in northern Gaza. UNRWA has urged Israel to lift its ban on the organization, which plays a pivotal role in delivering desperately needed aid to the besieged people of Gaza. In November, Israel's parliament passed two controversial bills, one banning UNRWA from operating in Israeli territory and another mandating the closure of its premises in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, as well as in war-torn Gaza. يعاني سكان غزة من نقص حاد في الطعام بسبب الحصار الذي تفرضه إسرائيل وهو. For the third day in a row, the Gaza Strip faces relentless Israeli bombardment, escalating violence and worsening humanitarian conditions.
The Gaza Strip remains under relentless Israeli military assault, marking 3 days of intense bombardments. Since October 7, 2023, the Palestinian Ministry of Health reports over 45,700 deaths, with a significant number of women and children among the casualties. In the past 24 hours, Israeli airstrikes have killed more than 80 Palestinians, raising Gaza's death toll to 45,805. Israeli occupation forces claim to have conducted over 100 airstrikes targeting what they describe as terror sites, asserting that Hamas operatives were among those eliminated. However, these operations have inflicted severe civilian casualties and caused widespread destruction. The Palestinian Ministry of Endowments highlights the destruction of over 800 mosques and 3 churches, exacerbating Gaza's humanitarian crisis. Ceasefire negotiations, mediated by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States, aim to end the 15-month-long conflict. The urgency of these talks has intensified following the release of a video by Hamas showing an Israeli detainee, increasing pressure for detainee negotiations. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces detained over 20 Palestinians, including children, and fatally shot a man during a raid near Nablus, adding to regional tensions. The international community expresses growing concern, calling for an immediate ceasefire to protect civilian lives. Humanitarian organizations warn of a worsening crisis as destroyed infrastructure, including places of worship and hospitals, severely hampers access to essential services.
An Egyptian official source has completely denied claims by Israeli media regarding Egypt's preparations for military intervention in Yemen. The Egyptian official source added that such reports are disinformation and completely unfounded. Moving on, the Houthis have targeted an Israeli power station south of Haifa with a hypersonic missile. The Houthi spokesperson confirmed the successful strike on the Urut Rabin station, claiming that the operation achieved its goal. He also emphasized that support operations for Gaza would continue alongside ongoing military capability development. He stated that the Houthis are enhancing their military capabilities to pressure Israel into ending its aggression and lifting the Gaza blockade. And now we move to the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has threatened to cancel the ceasefire agreement with Lebanon if Hezbollah does not withdraw from southern Lebanon. During a visit to an Israeli military base to attend an exhibition of weapons seized during war, the Israeli Defense Minister claimed that Israel is committed to implementing the agreement in Lebanon. He stated that Israel would take measures to ensure the safe return of residents to northern settlements, but only if Hezbollah completely withdraws to the area south of the Litani River.
ברור לחלוטין שמה שראינו בתחום המנהרות החודרות.
Lebanese National News Agency announced a new Israeli incursion in the town of Ataryon and on the outskirts of the city of Taiba in southern Lebanon. The agency reported that an Israeli force advanced into the Ziqaq area on the outskirts of Ataryon, where they carried out land and road bulldozing. Additionally, Israeli helicopters flew over the heights of the Shab'a farms in southern Lebanon. UNIFIL issued a statement in which it accused the Israeli military of deliberately damaging facilities belonging to UNIFIL and the Lebanese army in southern Lebanon. In its statement, UNIFIL noted that an Israeli bulldozer was observed destroying a blue barrel marking the ceasefire line between Lebanon and Israel in Al-Labuna area, as well as a Lebanese army observation tower near UNIFIL positions. The statement emphasized that the Israeli army deliberately and directly destroyed UNIFIL property and the infrastructure of the Lebanese army. Egypt's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Migration Badr Abdel-Ati and his Lebanese counterpart Abdullah Abu Habib have discussed the latest developments in Lebanon in light of the upcoming session of the Lebanese parliament to elect a new president. Egypt's Minister Abdel-Ati stressed the need for intensive efforts to achieve a Lebanese-led consensus to end Lebanon's presidential vacancy, free from foreign interference. The ministers also discussed Syria's political and security situation, emphasizing support for the Syrian people's will, state unity, and a Syrian-led political transition without foreign influence. The head of the International Committee of the Red Cross has emphasized that the ceasefire in Lebanon must be upheld, urging the continued flow of humanitarian aid to support civilians in the country. She stressed that Lebanese civilians cannot bear the consequences of a collapse in the ceasefire, which could lead to more death and destruction after the expiration of the 60-day deadline. And now we move on to the latest developments in Syria. Turkish Minister of Trade Omar Bolat has announced that around 40,000 Syrians have returned to their country from Turkey since the start of the voluntary return process. The Turkish minister also stated that the number of Syrians returning to their homeland since December the 8th has reached 40,000 individuals who crossed through the border gates between the two countries. Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammad Shia al-Sudani has stated that his government successfully shielded Iraq from the fiery belt threatening the region due to the Israeli actions in Gaza and Lebanon. Al-Sudani emphasized that developments in Syria have a significant impact on the region's future and held major powers, along with the international community, responsible for the ongoing crisis in Gaza. Syrian Foreign Minister Asad al-Shibani has arrived in the Qatari capital Doha as part of an Arab tour that will also include the United Arab Emirates and Jordan. The Syrian news agency confirmed the arrival of the Syrian delegation, which includes Defense Minister Morhaf Abu Qasra and Head of the General Intelligence Anas Khattab. Jimmy Carter's state funeral has begun in Georgia, his home state. His motorcade arrived at Georgia's state capital, where dignitaries welcomed his son Jack and grandson Jason. The casket was then taken to the Carter Presidential Library, received by a military honor guard. Family members, including his son Chip and grandson Jason, spoke warmly about Carter's legacy. Following Tuesday's service in Washington, Carter will be privately buried in Plains, Georgia. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has left for South Korea, Japan, and France amid South Korea's political turmoil. Blinken will meet South Korean officials to discuss strengthening Indo-Pacific cooperation with Japan. In France, talks will focus on Middle Eastern and European challenges, including Gaza ceasefire efforts. He's also expected to return on January the 9th. Manchester Airport has temporarily closed its runways due to heavy snowfall, but reopened after snow ploughs cleared the tarmac. The airport announced that runways were reopened several hours later after snow ploughs worked to clear the tarmac, but delays to departures and arrivals were still expected. Amber weather warnings for snow and ice remain in effect across parts of England and Wales, with up to 30 to 40 centimeters of snow expected in northern England. Now we move to the latest developments of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia's aviation authority, Rosaviastiza, has announced the temporary suspension of flights at airports in 3 cities located east of Moscow. The suspension took place from 7:15 GMT to ensure civilian aircraft safety. While the specific reason was given, previous closures occurred to the potential threats from Ukrainian drone strikes. Ukraine's Air Force has reported shooting down 61 of 103 drones launched by Russia overnight. Ukraine's Air Force noted that 42 other drones were lost, likely due to Ukraine's electronic jamming techniques to misdirect or disrupt Russian drones. No reports of significant damage or casualties have emerged yet. Russia reported intercepting 8 U.S.-made missiles and downing drones of drones. Russian Ministry of Defense reported that its forces had captured a settlement in the Luhansk region, while its air defense systems intercepted 8 U.S.-made missiles and downed 72 drones. Russian rescue workers have cleared more than 86,000 metric tons of contaminated sand and earth on either side of the Kerch Strait following an oil spill in the Black Sea last month. The oil leaked from 2 aging tankers that were hit by a storm on December 15. One sank and the other ran aground. More than 10,000 people have been working to shovel up viscous, foul-smelling fuel oil from sandy beaches in and around Anapa, a popular summer resort. Moving on to Russia, the Ukrainian Air Force has said that its air defenses drowned 34 out of 81 drones launched by Russia overnight. It added that 47 drones were lost, referring to Ukraine's use of electronic warfare to redirect Russian drones. Russia's Federal Security Service has announced that it had thwarted a large attack in the city of Yekaterinburg and detained 4 teenagers who were allegedly planning to detonate a bomb in a crowded area. Russia's Federal Security Service added that it had seized components of a homemade explosive device and that investigators in the region had opened a criminal case. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. Israeli Kfir Brigade withdraws from Gaza after 2 months, losing 13 soldiers in northern fighting. The Israeli Defense Minister threatens to cancel Lebanon's ceasefire unless Hezbollah withdraws south of the Litani River. And the Turkish minister reports 40,000 Syrians voluntarily returned home through border crossings since December the 8th. And this concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EG to stay informed. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Qnews.